Hey, this is Will, and in this section, we are going to be setting up our etcd cluster in preparation for installing Kubernetes. And we're going to start off by talking about what is etcd. So I want to give you a little bit of background on what we're doing when we go ahead and install etcd on our servers. So what is etcd? Etcd is a distributed key value store that provides a reliable way to store data across a cluster of machines. And that comes from the official etcd website. Essentially, what etcd does is it provides a way to store data across a distributed cluster of machines and make sure the data is synchronized across all machines. So if we have a highly available Kubernetes cluster with multiple nodes, Kubernetes needs a place to store that data and make sure that that data is stored in a distributed way, and to make sure that that data is reliably synchronized across all the nodes in the cluster. So because our Kubernetes cluster is going to be a distributed system, it needs a distributed data store, and Kubernetes uses etcd as its distributed data store. You can find more information as well as the etcd source code, because etcd is open source, in the etcd GitHub repository, and there's a link to that there as well. And if you want either one of those links, check out the description to the video. You can find the links down there. So how is etcd used in Kubernetes? Well, Kubernetes uses etcd to store all of its internal data about cluster state. So for example, if I go to create some pods within my Kubernetes cluster, those pods are going to be represented by some kind of data. They're going to be represented by data objects, and all of my Kubernetes controllers need to have access to that data. So what we do is we store that data about the state of the cluster in a distributed data store known as etcd. So the data needs to be stored, and it needs to be reliably synchronized, and that is the purpose that is fulfilled by etcd. So therefore, we need to install etcd on each of our Kubernetes controller nodes and create an etcd cluster that includes all of those controller nodes. We don't need to install it on the worker nodes. We just need to install it on the controller nodes. And of course, you can find more information on managing an etcd cluster for Kubernetes in the official Kubernetes documentation. So they provide a little more information on dealing with etcd. If you want some more background information or just some additional reading, be sure to check out that link. I want to just quickly go back to our architectural diagram so you can have a little bit of a visual idea of what I've been talking about before we move on. As you can see, we've got our two controllers, controller 1 and controller 2, and etcd is a service that is installed on both of those controllers. So we're going to be installing etcd on both of our controller nodes. You can see it's not installed on any of our other nodes, just the controller nodes. And these two etcd services are going to be communicating with one another to form an etcd cluster that spans across both of these controller nodes. So that should give you just a little bit of background and a little bit of an idea of the architecture that we're going to be implementing as we go ahead and install and configure our etcd cluster.